Okay, this is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy, and today we are going to assess the assessor of the town of Palermo, Oswego County, New York. The assessor's name is David Roach, and he is also the assessor for a number of small towns in the area. And I'm going to relay my experience having my assessment reviewed with him in a one-on-one meeting at the assessor's office, town of Palermo. My overall, once we got face to face, it went very well. I thought that, what I wanted him to do was to be, transparent about how he came to his figure. And I wanted to establish that the figure was generated quantifiably. And because at first glance, it didn't appear as though it was, because there was just a lot of round numbers involved, and it just looked like it was, an intuition type of thing. Once we had the face-to-face meeting, things went very well. It started off poorly in that, that I had called his office during the office hours posted on their website, and he told me he couldn't talk to me because he was busy handling matters for other towns, which I didn't think was appropriate to be handling other towns' business during his business hours for this particular town. And so, we didn't get off to a good start, and then, we had some issues in scheduling, and I just, sensed a bit of attitude from him. And but ultimately we got the one-on-one scheduled, and once we got face to face, the conversation went extremely well. I had foiled the data from the town, the supervisor's or the assessor's file, and the town clerk. After waiting the 19 days of the 20 that's required business days to respond to the Freedom of Information law request. She informed me that the assessor had no data for me. And, of course, I responded to that's, ludicrous. And, anyway, ultimately they provided the report that the state system generates. And, that was helpful. And so that I could review that to try to figure out where it is that he was coming from. And I had a chance to look at his land tables. And it was the data is a little hard to decipher exactly what it was that they were doing there. So I had a rough idea of what it was he was doing, but I calculated a different figure than what he had done, because I wasn't reading the table right, because I didn't have the documentation to explain how the table was used. But at least the data was there. And I appreciate them providing that. I would appreciate a better description, in that report as to how that was derived. And also what I didn't get was how those figures came to be. What he told me is that, for example, they were using $300 per acre for wetland, whereas last year it was $200 per acre for wetland. And again, those are awfully round figures. Where did they come up with that figure? And what he was telling me is that they analyzed the sales. I don't know for what period of time, but they analyzed sales and then looked at those sales and then applied those sales, for this class, the 300 class. I think this is 314 if I remember correctly. This is rural vacant land, and he said that they had taken the sales of that class and then applied it, adjusted the numbers for residual, for primary, for woodland, pasture, all this kind of stuff, and that's how they did it. But the thing is that what I would have liked to have known was, what were those numbers and how did they come to them? In other words, they used the sales from that class. What were those sales? So what they're doing is they're giving us the multipliers, but they're not telling us how they derived them. And if I knew what the sales were, I could see if the sales were uh, made sense for my particular property. You know, and even with certain classifications, like for example, I had a recent case with a medical building. Well, it's the same class, 465, but some medical buildings have major equipment like MRI machines and whatnot, and some medical buildings don't, and that impacts the if there's major difficult to move and very expensive equipment in a building, the tenants tend to be longer term tenants. They can't just pick up and leave, and so that impacts things very significantly. And so with the land or rural vacant land, they can vary very significantly based on wetland and wasteland influence and road influence. There could be a lot of variety to it. And, I need to know what those sales are that they use to plug in those numbers, because otherwise they're just essentially random numbers. And yes, they're applying it in a uniform way, but, it's just, it's more complicated than that. And I know that they're trying to make it so the assessment job is practical to do. But it still needs to be accurate. It still needs to be connected to fair market value. And so, I need that data to be able to come to that conclusion. And so far, I don't have that, but I haven't been able to articulate, the request. And so I'm still trying to figure that out, and I will ask them again. But at this juncture, I was very pleased with the assessor's, he was willing to listen. He told me that he'd never set foot on the property. He says that he knows that I, own the property, and I've been there many times, and then more than likely I know things about it that he doesn't. And if I can bring those things to his attention and they make sense, he's willing to make an adjustment. He's willing to listen. He's willing to accept an email. He's willing to accept a phone call. And that's all that I could ask of him. And so what he ultimately did was the calculation that he did based on the wetlands and all this kind of stuff actually came to a higher figure, and he reduced it back down based on my sale. Initially, my radar was up because he pinned the purchase price as the assessment, and that doesn't strike me as being appropriate. But it was kind of a welcome stranger in reverse. He was adjusting it down. But the reason that it caught my attention is because my assessment actually went up. And but apparently the difference between the land calculation of last year and this year is quite significant. Obviously, the wetland went from $200 an acre to $300 an acre. That's 33% increase. That's very significant. I'd have to look at what the residual and the undeveloped, what those rates are versus this year versus that last year. And of course, they didn't provide that data either, so I can't figure that out. What they're doing there either. So I'm going to be requesting that as well. But anyway, the bottom line is that what I expect from the assessor is it's completely understandable that he would need to apply mass assessment techniques. But when a taxpayer, calls the situation to his attention, I expect him to listen and look into it. And if an adjustment is warranted, make an adjustment. If not, just relay, their opinion. It's their job to have an opinion that it doesn't warrant a change, and then politely point out their appeal options. If they disagree, it's just an opinion of value. He is a certified appraiser and a certified, assessor for the state and all this stuff, and so he's knowledgeable. But he's got hundreds of properties to deal with, and mistakes happen. But he's willing to listen, and that's all I expect from him. And so, as long as he does that, I think he's doing a fantastic job. What would happen if we disagreed on a change? We'd have to see. But it's totally his prerogative to disagree and send you to your appeal options. And so there's nothing to complain about there either. So anyway, the bottom line is, he gave me a 15-minute meeting to sit down and discuss him. I was prepared. It took me a while to get the town clerk to get me some data so that we could talk apples and apples. So that was kind of concerning on the part of the town to not provide that data. And I would have liked to have more data than what it is that they provided. But we'll get into that later. But anyway, overall, town of Palermo, I was just very pleased with his approach, and it's superior to 90% of what it is that I've seen out there in the 15 counties that I participated in these cases in, with dozens of assessors. This is one of the best interactions that I've had. It didn't start off well, but it ended well, and I feel as though if I can, if I have additional concerns, that I can call or email him and he will respond to me. And that's all I ask from an assessor. So as far as giving him a rating, I'd like to give him an A because, ultimately in the end, I thought he did great, but still, I foiled the data and I didn't get, all the things that I thought that I should get. Apparently they don't think that that's customary, and maybe I'm more particular than most people, but I'll follow through and see if they'll provide me with that data. And and my initial interaction with the town clerk did not go well. She was she was not particularly helpful, and she didn't give me the data. It came down to the very last day. The town attorney was responsive. I appreciate him. The town supervisor hasn't been particularly responsive. I've had issues with their code guy, and she, apparently she sides with the code guy. And that's a completely different story, but, we're going to have to disagree on her support of that code guy because, his behaviors, but let's stick to assessments for now. So I'm going to have to give him a B. But I think that his overall approach is worthy of an A, because of the initial interaction. He couldn't talk to me because he's doing other town business. Got a knock off for that. The town clerk, is part of the team, and the town supervisor, the attorney. Basically, if he follows through and gets me that data, I'll give him an A. Right now, I'm going to give him a B. And hopefully it ends up being an A. And right now I'm going to give this assessor a B, but I really think that potentially he's worth. I think that his overall is worth an A. But I'm going to give him a B, just the overall circumstance, because I can't give everybody an A, because there definitely were some issues. But anyway, overall I like the way he handles things, and the fact that he listens to people. That's all you can ask for. So I think he's doing a great job. So that's the town of Palermo, David Roach, the assessor, town of Palermo, Oswego County, and the attorney's name is let me get that for you, because I think it's worth noting. Let me see here. Why don't I have that? Okay, stop. Well, I'm gonna let it go for now. It's it is Graham Seiter, Seiter. This is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy. Thank you.